Hi, my name is Wiley Sharp with Catamaran Central, and today I am joined with Keegan Steyn for episode 4 of Cat Chat Live. This is Keegan's debut on the Cat Chat Live podcast. And, if you guys have gotten to episode 4, you've heard me talk about myself enough. So, let's just jump right into it. Like, who are you, Keegan? What do you do? How'd you get here? That sort of stuff.
Thank you very much, Wiley. Yeah, really excited to be on the podcast this week. A bit of background from me. So originally born in South Africa, my family moved to the States in 2001. So I've been in America quite a long time. From there, grew up in Virginia, moved out to Colorado for college. And then right after college, I moved down to the Caribbean. Down in the Caribbean, I ran charter boats for 6 years, all the way from I started with a Lucia 40 and then was on to a Leopard 50 for 3 years, and then moved on to a Lagoon 620 for 2 years before moving here to Florida, start working with you. Been loving the Caribbean, love the water, love catamarans. My dad was in the Navy when he was a much younger man, so always kind of grew up around the water. And when we did live in Virginia, we spent many a weekend in Annapolis looking at all the sailboats and dreaming. It was really nice to jump down to the Caribbean and start that life.
What was the moment where you were in Colorado or, back in Virginia where you're like, you know what, I'm moving to the Caribbean. I'm going to start running boats. Like, what was the catalyst for that?
Growing up, it was always talked about in my family. I never thought that I'd be great behind a desk. So it was always conversation. It was everything from me wanting to be a game ranger when I was a little kid to when I went out to Colorado, working at ski resorts. I worked at Jackson Hole for a little bit. And then, my family took a trip down to the British Virgin Islands and jumped on a moorings boat. And it's kind of the time where it all shifted for both myself and my parents. They were kind of looking at other options for themselves. My dad was at that time working for a security camera and access control company. And before I knew it, he was going to South Africa to get his captain's license. And after moving my sister into college, they flew down to the BVI and started running charters themselves. Kind of during that time, I also started thinking about it. I wasn't quite as quick to jump on it as my dad. I had to finish up college. But in my summer vacations while in Boulder, I was fighting for that dream. So I was flying to South Africa. I was getting any bit of my captain's license I could get done in that summer vacation, coming back to school. And then, like I said, going back to just finish it up. Yeah, kind of that trip. I think we'd have to say that Christmas trip down there, I just fell in love with it. And talking to a few captains at the different bars and all that, it seemed like an amazing opportunity. And it was something I was ready to jump into.
So you're obviously a captain. So you have a 200-ton Yachtmaster. That's what you hold, correct?
Right. Yeah. So I got that. I flew over to Cape Town. It was a good excuse to visit family. And after my dad had sailed through Cape Town quite a bit, both in the military and then to get his 200-ton, he said, if you're going to get it, you might as well sail in the hardest place it is to sail in the world. And,
yeah, that's how I did mine. I mean, Cape Town's no joke for sailing. So in addition to having your captain's license, you're also a dive master as well,
correct.
Too.
Yep. And that kind of came. I always loved diving. I started diving when I was a younger kid, but really started going after all the different licenses during COVID. During 2020, I was operating a Leopard 50 at the time, but we couldn't have any guests, so it gave us a lot of time. And luckily, I had a few friends who were instructors, and it gave us the time to just check off the different boxes, start upgrading my license. And then when I moved on to the Lagoon 620, we were going to offer diving. So it was time for me to get my DM and had a blast. I was down in Honduras for about a month, and it was one of the best times just diving every day. You can't get much better than that.
And so you mentioned, we were talking about this on the phone the other day, working in the yachting industry during pandemic, and your experience and mine were very different because you guys were on a charter boat down there, but no guests could come in for an extended period of time. So you guys were just, working on the boats, training. But more importantly, you convinced a girl from Tampa, from Virginia that was going to school in Tampa to come down to the Virgin Islands and live with you. And now you're getting married in 2 months time?
Exactly. 70, 60 days to go. So it was actually Olivia who told me, I'm going to come be your chef. Quite funny. And my response was, can you cook? And she quickly said, but I'll learn. So, when the pandemic hit, Olivia was at the University of Tampa at the time and had gone fully remote. So they were all online. And I just made the point that, I've got Wi-Fi. So she quickly joined me down. We had a beautiful month and a half of no guests and getting to know, the new boat. She had never been on the Leopard 50 before. And she was able to meet, was actually a blessing. She was able to meet a lot of the other crew because generally at that time of year, it was March. So we're hammering down spring break charters. It's kind of that one time of the year you don't see a lot of your friends. But it gave her the opportunity to meet all the girls and all the guys and kind of create that bond before we got the hectic June and July for that season. Yeah. It's
That
pretty
now
special.
that's interesting the way you phrase that. Is she said she was going to come down and be your chef, as a matter of fact. And anybody that knows Olivia knows that she is a very strong-willed individual, and so that doesn't surprise me that
Yeah.
she said, "Hey, I'm coming down to be your chef, and I'll figure out how to cook." And she's a phenomenal chef.
Exactly. And that she did. She went to Ashburton over in the UK, got all the certs she needed. And when she came back, it was fantastic. Being able to work with each other and we created quite a strong bond, as teammates, but also as partners. It was incredible. Yeah.
So fast forward, so you guys worked through the pandemic together on that Leopard 50, and then you ultimately moved up to a Lagoon 620 named Huntress, and you guys ran that boat for a couple of years, and then made the transition almost. I mean, we're coming up on 2 years now
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go from sailing boats to selling boats. What was kind of the catalyst that led to that? I mean, why did you originally reach out to me and say, okay, hey, I think I'm interested in this? What was the thought process there?
Well, I think, I always said, almost immediately going into it, I don't think the sailing or catamaran life is for the long haul. I think that, generally I saw a lot of people lasting about 5 years or a bit more before, it kind of wears on you. I was doing charter seasons of 18 to 26 charters every year. As much as I loved the guests, by that last charter, I was ready to have some alone time. And just kind of always looking, okay, what's next? What can I do with the skills I have here and sort of move into what could be the rest of my life work, that transition is important and something that I kept my eye on throughout my time down there. And then after meeting you at a few boat shows, we got along really well. And I thought, why not just reach out and see if there's a spot for me.
Yeah, your timing was perfect because it was, about a year or two after Peter had joined us, and we were looking at growing, and especially somebody with a background in the charter business, which is kind of where my background came from as well too. We kind of talked a little bit about this, Bill and I, in one of the earlier episodes, but I do think one of the big differentiators between, the team here at Catamaran Central versus a lot of our competitors in the catamaran brokerage space is the fact that, you were a captain, boats, you've changed impellers at 3 o'clock in the morning on charter on a generator, or, dicked around with an air conditioning in the middle of the night while on charter. And I think it's that technical experience that one gets working commercially on boats that gives us a huge leg up in terms of like our knowledge base, that what you learn running, either charter operations or running a charter boat is a lot different than what you learn if you're just, recreationally sailing on the weekend, or even living aboard for that matter. If you're cruising, your air conditioning goes out in the middle of the night, you're just going to open the hatch, turn on the fan, and figure it out the next day. When you're running a charter boat, that's not, you don't get to wait till the next morning. You just have to dive right into it. And I think that a lot of the skill sets that make you a successful charter captain also can make you a successful yacht broker. And what I mean by that is, when you're running the boat, nobody's telling you Tuesday, hey, you've got to get up and wash your boat. You just know, like, all right, I got to clean the boat. I'm going out on charter on Wednesday. We've got a provision. I've got to do oil changes. Like, nobody's micromanaging you to make sure that you succeed. And that's kind of very similar to what you do as a yacht broker. I'm not calling you at 8 o'clock in the morning and saying, hey, you need to follow up with A, B, and C. If you want to succeed, you have to just get up and do it. And that's very similar to being a successful charter captain.
100%. I mean, much like this job where, if you don't go for it, you're not going to make any money. That was, if the boat's not going to run, you're not going to make money either. So,
Right.
you got to protect the asset. And that goes a long way with, every boat I worked on. The owners of that boat were sad to see me go, but it's because we protected the asset and we kept it running. Because I also didn't want to be waking up at 3 a.m. fixing a generator because I didn't change the oil. or I didn't check the impellers or anything like that.
That's perfect. Well, that's kind of a brief summary of who Keegan is. It's a little bit longer intro than you'll probably get from him on subsequent episodes. But I just thought it was important to add a little bit more context into who Keegan is and how he arrived here on Cat Chat Live. So as you guys know from the last couple of episodes, our next segment we like to do is called Between the Hulls. And you know, I think Keegan talking about his background working in the charter business as a, captain is perfect segue to talk about like what is it that makes a good charter catamaran. I mean, we deal with a lot of customers that want to put boats in a crude yacht charter, and like in your opinion, what makes a good charter catamaran, Keegan?
I mean, it's quite amazing. I mean, there's so many boats out there, and I think it all for me all bottles down to how many people you can have on board. The Lucia 40 I was running in my first year down there. It was only a 3-cabin boat, and we had a blast with it. A beautiful owner edition on that starboard hull, and then 2 cabins on the port side. But it was a few things that I didn't love about the boat was on that port side was a shared head. And I found that many guests almost felt uncomfortable sharing the head with the crew. So in terms of, it's all about layout. And I think a strong charter boat is anywhere between 3 to 5 guest cabins that are available to the guests, as well as ensuite bathrooms in those cabins. I think it's a very differentiator on boats that book and don't. And it's a big factor in terms of how many charters you can get on the books.
Yeah, I mean, there's that old saying in the business that it's all about heads and beds. And when you look at the kind of the breakdown of any of these crude charters, if it's like a family charter, then it's, mom, dad, kids. Could be a multi-generational charter with, grandma, grandpa, adult kids, and grandkids. It could be, 4 couples from, hometown that all like to travel together. But having, at least 3 guest cabins and really 4 guest cabins that are all en suite and all similar size, I think is something like really, really important for chartering.
Exactly.
If you were looking at a boat from like, I mean, with what we sell in crude yacht charter boats, it's been everything from, like I've sold Lagoon 450s back in the day that went into crude yacht charter. I've sold, Sunreef 80s, Lagoon 77s on the other end of that spectrum. If you're looking at owner operating a boat, does that purchase decision, in your opinion, look different for an owner operator versus an owner that's putting hired crew on board a boat?
I would say so. It definitely, when you get to the larger catamarans, like the 65s, the 67s, those over 60-foot boats, there's definitely a lot more going on board. And I'm not saying that owner operator couldn't sort it out and become great crew, but it's certainly a lot easier with a boat that's similar. A Leopard 50 is definitely high up on one of my favorite boats out there. I ran one for 3 years, and what they've done at Leopard is create an incredibly simple boat to maintain. That saved me a lot, especially in my early days when I was learning on board. But it's a pretty straightforward boat. It's pretty, when a light goes out, you snip the light and you replace it. You don't have to go coding into E-Plex or some of those more high-tech systems. So I think it does, especially if you're coming straight into it from land, you never run boats and then you jump into, owner operating. I think it's important to sort of think about, okay, how comfortable am I sorting out these systems when things go wrong, because they will go wrong.
What I think too, like the, from an owner operator versus hired crew standpoint, with an owner operator, you're usually going into, your second chapter, second career in life. You've already done something, successful to be able to step away from that role early, buy a boat and then go operate it. And in a lot of those scenarios, it's kind of more of a lifestyle decision, more than a financial decision. I mean, they still, can make good money, pay off the boat, et cetera, et cetera. But somebody buying like a Leopard 50 to own or operate it, they're probably doing it more as a lifestyle decision more than anything else. And if you look at, those boats which trade anywhere from the, upper 8s to 1,000,001, let's say, you compare it to like a larger boat, like a Lagoon 65, like the one you just sold last month, earlier this month, that's a $3.5 million purchase. And so what goes into it is a far more complex boat, like you already touched on. a much bigger boat that requires a lot more experience to run, like just to drive, let alone maintain. And then also the guest expectations, I think, are a lot higher for a boat that's chartering out for, 60, $70,000 a week. That's kind of expecting, miniature super yacht quality work or service and cuisine and whatnot versus a more like 50-foot boat. And you've kind of run both of those boats. I mean, you ran a Leopard 50 and you ran a Lagoon 620, and they are kind of, different programs all together.
Big time. I mean, the small things of, once we jumped onto the 620, Olivia and I, we ran it as two crew for a number of months. And we felt that, we couldn't offer the same service that we did on the Leopard 50. So we did end up hiring a third. And that changed the game completely. In terms of the maintenance side, it's something that I often laugh about these days. But when we were on that Leopard 50, we were based in St. Thomas. So we spent many a week hanging on the beaches of St. John because everything on that boat I could maintain myself. Jumping onto that 620, she was a bit of an older boat, but there wasn't a second off charter that I wasn't fixing something or working on something or maintaining something. So it is a massive step up in those 12-foot in terms of how much you've got to kind of work on the boat to keep it running smoothly. And then, like you said, with service, it's, the charter's going out for significantly more than you were on the 50. So the guests paying that number are expecting that higher level of service. And it's hard to do with just two people. People do it. But for us, Olivia and I, it saved us a lot of stress and kind of got us where we wanted to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like, when you look at, like you mentioned, you guys tried running with two and ultimately you brought on a third. If you're an owner operator, you probably don't want like a third person living in your home with you full time as well. And then if you look at, talking about the Lagoon 620s, when you look at the ones that are heavily booked versus the ones that aren't heavily booked, probably one of the biggest differentiators is, are they running it with two or are they running it with three? Because the expectation for the charterers has been that higher level of service. And so not having a third on board almost guarantees you may not end up with the same level of service.
100%.
So would you say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially when you add diving, a lot of the bigger boats do have diving on board. And for us, I was the dive master. So when I was underwater for an hour and Olivia was cooking lunch, trying to serve cocktails and take care of all the guests, it just didn't work out. So like when you do go to those larger boats, you do offer more to the guests, which is why that third also comes into play.
Right. And it's not just diving, it's things like e-foils, sea bobs, diving, as you mentioned, but just a lot more water sports heavy of a program. So,
And then the more cabins. So, our third Haley was amazing. She was unreal at making cocktails. So that always keeps the guests happy, but also interior looked amazing. Some things that Olivia and I might have missed because I was running around doing water sports and Olivia was cooking. Haley was always there to help us out and keep us rolling.
yeah, which is like super freaking important. So as you guys know, the next segment, we always pick a make and model to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive in. And because of Keegan's experience being on a Leopard 50 for 3 years, as well as you've sold a couple of Leopard 50s as well too, we figured that's probably a pretty good boat for us to do a deep dive in. So the Leopard 50 came into production in 2018, and then they came out of production in 2024, I believe, right? 2024 or is it 20?
24, 25 is right
20?
there.
Okay.
At the newer model came out for the Annapolis show last year.
Okay, yeah, I remember so it was replaced by the Lagoon 52. From my understanding, they built somewhere around 300 hulls of the Leopard 50, and like not a ton of changes over the production run. The first couple of years they offered it with the lounge, as well as what they called the performance version, which was simply a Leopard 50 without a lounge. I believe they only built 4 of those, and I don't know why you would ever buy that boat without the lounge personally.
No, that was a hit. When I first stepped on board, I picked her up actually here in Fort Lauderdale and sailed down to the BVI with the boat. And that lounge or flybridge was a game changer. It's definitely somewhere every guest wants to spend at least sunrise and sunset. So yeah, I wouldn't buy it either without that.
Well, like one of the pushbacks the 45 and the 50 for that matter got about the lounge was, like, oh, if we have that seating area up there, it's going to reduce how much solar we're able to have on the boat. But like Salty Dog, the last Leopard 50 you sold, I mean, that thing had what, 2,000 watts of solar powering the lithium bank. And like, I mean, you're able to fit a ton of solar on there if you do like a custom array. I mean, I think I've seen Leopard 50s with like up to like 32 or 3,800 watts of solar, which is more than adequate.
And what's beautiful with the 50, yes, the lounge does take up, I'd say 40 to 50% of that upper deck, but you do have that brim on the 50 too. So on Sea Dog, the boat I was running, she had soft solar panels all the way down that brim, all the way up into the forward cockpit area. So there's plenty of room up there, even for yoga when Olivia was on board doing yoga up there. So lots of room on that 50-foot.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that was like kind of one of the things that people complained about. And then like really the only other differentiator between the couple of non-lounge versus lounge boats is they redid the interior in like 2023, 2024, and same layout, same everything, just a different color veneer. But I think that's really the only change they made during the production run on the Leopard 50 as far as I'm aware.
It's sort of the one big difference too. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, go for it.
Was, at one point, Moorings was the only company that was able to purchase that 5-cabin version. So you had a lot of 4 cabins coming out, but towards the end of the run, you were, as a private buyer, able to purchase that 5-cabin, which makes a great 8-pack charter boat.
But I think, it's kind of, yeah, I love the Leopard 50. I know you love the Leopard 50, but who are we to say whether something's a good boat or not? I think if you ask Jeff, he would tell you the Leopard 50 is like one of the best 50-foot cats ever built, seeing as he, had a 4-cabin named Salty Dog, which is the boat you ran. And even before he sold that boat, he ordered a 5-cabin Sea Dog's one you ran, sorry. And then he bought another one that he named Salty Dog, which you ultimately sold for Jeff. But I think that's fairly rare that a manufacturer got a boat so right that a customer was like, you know what, I'll buy a second one.
Yeah, and at one point he had 2 at the same time. He loved that boat.
Yeah, trust me, I know. I was trying to sell Sea Dog while he had Salty, and I love Jeff. Challenging guy at times. I hope you're listening, Jeff. We'll send you this clip. So, from your 3 years on the Leopard 50 and then experience from selling a couple of Leopard 50s, what are some of the things that a buyer should be aware of or look for, while they're shopping, when the boat goes through survey? Are there any items that kind of jump out to mind to you as like known issues or Achilles heels with that make and model?
All in all, that boat's pretty solid. I was incredibly impressed with her. And even the boats, in the used market, when you jump on board, there's not a whole lot to kind of look for that a surveyor is not going to sort of find. One thing about them is the cable running from your rudders, that in a big swell, that does, stretch a bit, and it's running on 2 cars. And a good friend of mine who was on a 50 the same year I was, he was an older gentleman and would often come north during hurricane season when I would go south to Grenada. And on one of those trips up, he had a massive swell, and in that flex of the cable, it jumped off the car and he lost steering. And I was right outside the Dominican Republic in a big swell. So he's hand steering, and he's an older gentleman, so hand steering back there to get into a bay so that he could sort it out. But his advice to me was, Keegan, every time you have, a couple days of big swell, jump in there, tension it up a little bit, and you should be right as rain. So that's something as an operator always to watch for. And when I'm talking to crew who are on the 50s nowadays, when they make their trip down south to Grenada, to just tension that up before they put it on the hard, and as well during the Christmas swells.
Out of curiosity, which 50 was that? Was that Jamie on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I sold that boat as well, and he's Ed was the owner of that boat, and Jamie and Thea.
Yeah.
No, they're good people, man, and he knew that boat really well too.
He was an amazing resource for me. Just, it was my second year running boats. So we were right next to each other for the boat show that year down in St. Thomas. And he pulled me over and said, all right, come here. Let me just walk you around everything that I've noticed on my trip south. And he was always ready to, if he found something, he'd shoot me a text, being like, hey, just look out for this, and kept me rolling. But yeah, fantastic guy. But in general,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's kind of thinking back now. I had a lovely run. The 3 years on that boat, I didn't really, other than routine maintenance and kind of your average boat wear and tear, it didn't really have anything that jumped out at me.
Yeah, from my experience selling Leopard 50s, I wasn't aware of the steering cable needing tensioning and just monitoring. So that's a good bit of intel. Probably the biggest challenges that I've seen with the Leopard 50s were with the Empirbus, the marine digital switching. Could be a little bit problematic at times. I don't know if you ever had any issues with your Empirbus, but that's something that I've dealt with on surveys and 50s in the past. And then kind of more of just like a general like Leopard item is like the salon windows. Not all years, but there were definitely some years where they were more prone to like cracks developing out of the blue. Bill and I talked a little bit about that on the Leopard 40, but some of the earlier 50s definitely had that issue. Like that boat One Love that we just closed on, one of those windows was cracked. So just that's one thing I've noticed kind of disproportionately higher on the Leopards versus some of the other manufacturers. But yeah, to your point, all in all, they've always surveyed pretty well, provided maintenance has been properly done.
Yeah. Olivia gives them the nickname of the Ford truck. She said it's your farm Ford. It's going to run forever. If you just maintain it properly, change the oil when it asks, it's going to keep running. Compared to some of the other brands where it can be a little more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, there's such simple boats. I mean, I remember when I worked for Leopard, talking with Scott Woodruff, who was the sales manager at the time, and we were kind of talking about, hey, Scott, people are saying, oh, this is a charter boat. It's a charter boat. I want a private boat, even though they were private boats we were trying to sell. And Scott said, what a cruiser is looking for and what a charter company are looking for are pretty much the exact same, which is easy to work on, easy to get to a haul out facility, like just super simple parts availability, et cetera, and being able to have low skilled technicians anywhere in the world work on the boats. And I think categorically Leopard's always been really, really good on that
Big
front.
time. Big time. And to your point, a cruising boat that works for charter as well. The amazing thing that they did with that Leopard, the fore cabin, you still have that beautiful owner's suite in the starboard side, as well as that forward cabin in front of it. It's something that, threw every guest off a little bit when they stepped on board. They were just shocked to see, we've got a full berth that's very comfortable in front of this massive master. It was incredible. Yeah, that was a winner. Jeff's wife, actually, Kay, was sad to see the fore cabin go when they jumped on the five cabin because she loved that master cabin.
Yeah, funny sidebar here. Keegan must have obviously done something halfway decent as a captain because I think the owners of your Leopard 50 you ran and the Lagoon 620 are all going to be at your wedding in Anegada here in a couple
They
of
are,
weeks.
they are. Yeah, all four of them will be there. It'll be fun to see them
So
all.
yeah, we're gonna have a meeting. All of your current and former bosses. We're gonna do
There
a
you go.
yeah. But well, cool. I think that's kind of a good, just brief summary on the Leopard 50, and some of the things that both Keegan and I have noticed in terms of things to be on the lookout for, and just kind of a general overview on the boat. But I do think with Leopard 50s, the price coming down. I mean, they're phenomenal boats. Especially for the money. I mean, that boat One Love that we just closed on, it had that deal falling apart, which it was on the fence there for a minute. I kept telling Laura, I'm like, we need to buy this freaking boat because I think we could get it for the right number and sail it for a year or two and hopefully get, most of our money back out of it.
And the
So
beauty about them, I mean, you could jump on that boat, tweak it a bit, and you could sail all the way to Grenada and not think about it. I love those boats. I'd easily purchase one and start sailing.
yeah, they're phenomenal boats. So sweet. Well, there you go. That's the Leopard 50, y'all. We're going to just kind of jump into our next section, which is our frequently asked questions. So question that I've gotten for years, Keegan, I know you're getting it more and more as you continue to get more involved in boats going into crude yacht charter. But the question is it worth hiring a management company or should I self-manage my boat? And I think there's pros and cons to both methods. I have an opinion on which way is the better way of going, but how do you normally answer that question when somebody's like, "Hey, should I just hire the crew to manage the boat and self-manage it, or should I use a management company?
I mean, it's definitely a frequently asked question, and something that, you know, for me, when I was operating boats, I was always with a management company. And I've seen a lot of the benefits to having that company. You know, you do have someone who you can call on when you're stuck in Myru in the Grenadines and you need a pump, and they happen to know someone who's in St. Vincent who can run one down for you. They're a massive resource in that terms. And a big thing that I always say when comparing them is, you know, it's nice to kind of have, as an owner, someone who's looking out for your asset as well as the crew. I think that, you know, there are many amazing crews down in the Caribbean and around the world who are perfectly in tune and ready to manage a boat, but it is a whole lot of work. You know, there's a lot of bits and pieces, and you know, inquiries coming from guests, charter brokers, owners. You're managing all the finances of the vessel. You're making sure you're not overspending. But the management company really is a great sort of a way that can be managed. A management company managing that, and you can focus on the asset as the crew. Like I said, there are some crews who are so switched on that they're more than in line to manage their boats. But you also have the crews who become self-managed and they're not quite up for the job. And that, in that case, you see a lot of overspending. You see boats deteriorating with no real knowledge of what's going on because the crew's just fibbing to their owner.
Or
You
they
take
just
the
don't know better. They look at it like, "Oh, yeah, the boat looks fine," but, you know, they haven't done the 1,000-hour service on the generator or the Volvos or the Yanmars, or, you know, they're not as in tune. I mean, I think that there are incredible crews out there, but at the end of the day, you know, your captain is the COO of, you know, what could, you know, in a lot of these boats be the, you know, a multi-million-dollar business. And, you know, just because you met that captain on a charter and he made a great margarita and told great stories and you had the vacation of your lifetime doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right people to manage that entire business unit for you. I think some of the crews, particularly on the larger boats where you've got, you know, 4 crews, rotational crew, those scenarios, they might be a little bit better equipped than, you know, just a captain and chef to manage a boat. And I think a lot of it just depends on, you know, what as the owner your time allows too, and your knowledge base for managing that. I mean, I think one of the, you know, downsides to having a crew manage your boat for you is you're only, you know, a breakup, a pregnancy, you know, burnout away from getting the phone call that, hey, we're quitting and your boat's on the dock at Nanny Key. You know, we're really sorry, but this just isn't working. Or somebody has a slip and fall and hurts himself or blows himself up with a orca whale deterrent and is unable to operate the boat. And if you don't have management in place, you're kind of left in a position where you're scrambling to fill those roles. I think the kind of negative connotation that crew that, you know, want to push an owner in the direction of self-management will use is, well, management company is going to take a lot of your money and they're going to cost you a lot of money to do that. So why not pay me a little bit more money as the captain? I'll manage the boat for you and you'll make more money, I'll make more money, everybody wins. But I think you really lack that kind of third party oversight of, you know, what's happening on the accounting side. Are the, you know, crew outsourcing every time a wrench is turned? Are they doing, you know, some of the basic maintenance? Because inevitably there's stuff you're going to have to hire, you know, third party vendors to come in and do on the boat. But a lot of it, you know, as a captain, you should be able to do. And a management company is going to kind of hold that crew's feet to the fire to do those jobs. Whereas if you're self managing and you just don't know better, crew's going to be like, yeah, we need to get, you know, Johnny Smith out here to do our service at $150 an hour. And, you know, yeah, like I need to change the bimini top on my Lagoon 620. Let's get Mr. Sailmaker out here and pay him to swap it out. And it ends up just costing you a lot more money. And I think you can lose control of the financial side of the whole program in general. And go ahead.
similar to what you touched on before. You know, I don't think a whole lot of these boat owners who are putting their boats into charter know a whole lot about the boats. You know, you don't take, generally someone who buys a BMW doesn't know how to work on a BMW. These are highly complex boats, and because of that, you don't know what you're looking for when a crew says, "Oh, we absolutely need to replace this generator now." Well, no, it's got a large amount of hours, but it's good for another 2 seasons. That's where you run the risk of, you don't know. You've got Johnny just telling you, this needs to happen. You're going to say yes. He's going to say, we're going to need it for next season. You don't have anyone to kind of bounce that idea of, or someone who's in the industry and knows that you're actually fine for another 2 seasons.
Right. Yeah. No, we don't need to replace the generator. We just need to rewind the back end, and we've got 2 more
Exactly.
seasons out of it. And
Exactly.
rewinding that generator is going to cost X, whereas a replacement's going to cost Y. It's just having somebody like lay out all of the facts objectively, and then then you can actually make an informed decision on what makes the most sense for the program.
Big time, big time. And a lot of the time, it's just the lack of knowledge from, some captains out there. They just don't know. They just hear, everyone says replace your generator after 10,000 hours, but it was properly maintained. You're going to get a couple good
They
years
get
still.
15, 20,000 hours out
Yeah,
of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's little things like that. You just got to be really careful. I think, like we've touched on, there are amazing crews out there who are doing self-managed and they're crushing it. But you run the risk as a boat owner, have you found that right person? And the big risk is, if you don't find that right person, you're halfway through the season and they walk off, you're SOL.
Yeah, and from my experience in selling, a lot of these larger catamarans, some that have been, self-managed. As the owner, you don't really know the wheels are coming off the bus until you're on I-95 and the bus is doing 80 miles an hour and they start flying off in the middle of the highway, because you just don't know any better. And what that ends up doing is costing you as the owner a lot more money. I mean, I can think of one boat in particular. I'll leave make, model, and all other identifiers out of the conversation. But this poorly managed boat, at the end of the day, cost the sellers, when I sold the boat for them. Laura and I kind of estimated somewhere between 600,000 on the low end and up to 1 million on the high end, just from just like poorly managed by the crew. And that is a very hard pill for anyone to swallow. I don't care how much money you have. So, and I think kind of like one more thing that we've touched on a little bit kind of during this segment, but it's not just the boat operation, the maintenance, having somebody kind of overseeing and making sure things are being done the right way. It's also that financial oversight. I mean, we work very closely with and beyond yacht charters. And when you look at Colin's, background, he was, running big companies, CFO, C-suite executive, kind of in his next chapter in life in yacht management. And so he's able to take that professionalism, from running big companies and applying it into this kind of cottage industry, if you will. And for so many of our owners, they're buying boats and trying to capture the tax advantages of bonus depreciation, their costs of running the boat, et cetera, et cetera. And if you are trying to go through that process and you just get like a shoebox full of receipts handed to you, it makes your life a lot harder, and your accountant's life and your tax attorney's life a lot more challenging, getting handed that versus like, a detailed financial report where you're looking at, your cost of goods sold, your gross margin, net margin, et cetera, et cetera. So me personally, like, I probably have the skill set where I could manage my own boat. If I bought a boat, put it into the, crude yachts down in the Virgin Islands or Bahamas or wherever. But I think that my time would be better suited outsourcing that to a yacht management company personally, because the time I wouldn't be spending on the day-to-day details of that program, I could focus on, my core job, which is, Catamaran Central and selling catamarans. So that's, yeah, I'm a big fan of putting your boat into a yacht management program.
I am as well. Yeah, I think it's just, in the long run, I think you run the risk of it costing you a lot more if you don't. To go back to the cruise argument, you're paying a yacht management X amount per year. Why don't I just do it for half that price? In the long run, when you come to sell, or you come to your boat and she has been maintained and now you lose 3 charters next season, you could lose a lot more money than you would have if it was just managed.
And the stress and the hassle factor that goes along
Yeah.
with that too.
It's a big asset far, far away, sailing around with a couple knuckleheads who are between 20 and 35, you know? It's
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, it's, yeah, I think we've talked about this in the past, but, when you stop and think about what people have allowed us to do for them on boats when we were in our, early 20s, mid 20s is absolutely mind blowing. Like,
yeah, moved out of college and moved into a $1 million asset.
yeah, 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 exactly. So, well, so that was this week's question. If you guys have any questions you'd like us to answer, definitely shoot us an email. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to educate, inform, and just some of these conversations that Keegan and I have informally as colleagues, or Bill and I. It's just fun way to have these conversations out in the open where everybody can listen. And so for the final segment of every video, we do our brokerage picks of the week. And since this week we featured the Leopard 50, we're gonna talk about the Leopard 50s right now. As it stands, as of the date of recording, there's 18 Leopard 50s currently on the market with a price range of anywhere between 1.2 for a private 2022 all the way down to 619 for a boat coming out of moorings. Nothing in the Leopard 50 market today has me overly excited. And I think you're kind of feeling that same way as well too, Keegan. But the boat I would be most interested in if I were in the market for a Leopard 50 is a 2023 located here in Fort Lauderdale. And the name of that boat it's like Arco something. I can't pronounce it. But the reason I like that boat a lot is they've got a price at 1.125, which is probably fairly close to where market is on that boat. It's a little bit on the high side, but the reason I like that boat is they did a really, really good electrical upgrade on it. They did a full Victron system with like a 48-volt system, 4,000 watts of solar. They did the Arco Zeus alternators, which are really cool units. They're basically giant inverters that go on your Yanmar diesels, and so they allow you to essentially not run your generator at all and be able to like really hit your lithium battery bank. And then they also did the thermodynamica air conditioning, which is far more effective or efficient, I should say, than the chilled loop that comes from the factory. And that boat's got 25 kilowatts of inverting power between a 240 inverter as well as a couple of Victron Quattro 120 inverters. So mean, that's probably the boat I'm most interested in for a Leopard 50. But yeah, I mean, even that boat, it doesn't have the hydraulic swim platform, which I think is kind of a big deal. Kind of needs a new tender, in my opinion. It's got a lot going for it, but it's not got everything that I would personally want on the boat. And I also believe it does not have the factory generator, which I'm just trying to confirm that right now, which I believe they don't need because of the system they put in place. But I am a big fan of the redundancy of having the factory generator. I just need to confirm whether it's got it or not.
I
But
agree
yeah,
with you. Having that generator as a backup is high up in my books, especially when I tend to favor the Northern Lights generators. I felt that they always run and they die less than the others at 2 in the morning. But even when you do load up with lithium and solar and all that, a 9 kilowatt up on the bow doesn't seem too out of this world.
no. What about you? Is there any of those 50s out there that are kind of a little more interesting than others?
Yeah, so there's a 2020 Leopard 50 on the market named Southern Charm. I know this boat personally. I sailed next to her for many years down in the British Virgin Islands, and I knew the owners very well.
Yeah, the
This is
Kings
one of
are
those.
good people.
Yeah, and like we talked about, they're owner operators. They chose this Leopard 50 because she was a simple boat to work on, and they had many, many successful years running charters down there. When I was on the 50, we were competing for the same spots and running at the same rate. So, it was a fantastic platform for them, and they've done some really nice upgrades to the boat. She's got almost 2,000 watts of solar add to the boat. She's got the 300 amp hour lithium battery bank that's been added since they purchased the boat. But then she also has those owner operator kind of features that you don't see on a lot of just solely charter boats, such as the washer dryer, the, uh, you know, 3 fridges, 2 freezers, and an ice maker on board. She's got the Code Zero and bowsprit, which I didn't have on Sea Dog. So there are some nice upgrades they've done that you would find on the more private boats, but she's a charter boat. She's run well, and I think they took really good care of her. So it's high up on my list.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they did a good job on that particular boat. And to your point earlier, I mean, they bought it as a private boat and then owner operated it in charters. So it's got all the things that one would be looking for in a private boat. And they just chose to, run it during the Caribbean, winter season as a charter boat as owner operators. But yeah, no, it's a nice boat as well too, and the owners are good people. Well, sweet. That's kind of a wrap here on episode 4 of Cat Chat Life Between the Hulls, or Cat Chat Live Life Between the Hulls. If there's anything you guys want us talking about in future episodes, definitely shoot us an email, leave a comment, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, so you get notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you guys so much for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you guys.